information.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. Her time has expired.
Mr Chairman.
I call Dr Cam Calder.
Mr Chairman, it's a great pleasure to rise and speak briefly on the Privacy Information Sharing Bill. Mr Chairman, as I see it, this bill is about honouring a trust, the trust the government has in holding information on an individual, and it's also about breaking open the silos of information, shattering those silos of information to allow better sharing of information. Now, this is a government that actually values trust. We delivered on every one of the policies we made in 2008, and we were rewarded with a significant increase in our percentage of the vote as a result. We value the trust of the electorate. Now, one of our major priorities in this forthcoming electoral cycle, we've said we want to rebuild Christchurch, we want to get a more competitive and productive economy, we're going to fiscally manage the government's finances so to get out of debt earlier, and we're also going to get better value from the public services. Now, the previous speaker could not see the relationship between that and actually delivering services to people who need them. And this is one of our major thrusts. We have announced a high-powered ministerial team to address poverty. Now, we're aware in this government that the global financial crisis has impacted more on the disadvantaged in society than others. It's inevitable. I'm walking around the streets of Manurewa speaking to the people in the Manurewa community. I'm hearing the difficulties they're facing. Now, in our first term, of course, we improved the participation options for them in early childhood education. We gave them greater opportunities to get necessary health care sooner, more conveniently, of course, and we're addressing the third world rates of rheumatic fever that we inherited in that community. One of the things, of course, that we need to make sure is that these most vulnerable kiddies, the ones we're dealing with, aren't falling through the cracks. And you're right. You're absolutely right. They are, they have been, and what we wish to do is to reduce the chances of that happening. So the Ministers of Education, Social Welfare, Health, Housing, we've got the Minister of Housing, we have the privilege of sitting right next door to the Minister of Housing from the last government, and of course Social Welfare, as I said, Health. Where's my warrant? These ministers and their agencies will be able to share information more readily. How will they do this? The bill amends the Privacy Act to improve public service delivery by introducing two new mechanisms for better, smarter information sharing. These can lead to more integrated services, reduced duplication and lower information handling costs. Now, what are the two key improvements? We've heard it mentioned in the past by some of the previous speakers, and I think it's a valid one. And what it is about widening the definition or the exception to allow the use and disclosure of personal information when there is a serious threat to public health or safety, life or health of an individual. Now, this currently is the threat must be imminent. Now, who's a clairvoyant? Who can tell when the threat is going to occur? I think the reality is that moving to the definition of a serious threat actually means that the damage to the vulnerable is less likely to occur. Now, the second innovation is a new mechanism will be inserted to make provision for the approval of information sharing agreements by order in a council. So if there is a problem, it can be dealt with expeditiously. Now, I did talk about honouring trust, of course, and if you're holding information on somebody, failure of security, sharing that information or inaccurate information, and use of information in ways that are not anticipated by the individual is a betrayal of that trust. So, to honour to that trust, to make sure that doesn't happen, to ensure that any resulting intrusions into personal privacy are minimised, the bill sets out the required content for information sharing agreements and the process for their approval, which will include consultation with the Privacy Commissioner and other interested parties. The bill sets out safeguards to ensure that approved information sharing agreements operate transparently and consistently with their intent. Mr Speaker, this bill, and we've heard from Charles Chauvel how it draws upon a lot of work, in-depth work by the Law Commission, addresses a very serious issue in our community. It will lead to better outcomes. I commend this bill to the House.
I call... The member must call. You must call out Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker.